There was no single moment when Raphael realized something was wrong. No dramatic event, no sudden breakdown, no visible sign that would have made anyone stop and ask questions. That was exactly what made it so easy for everyone else to miss. If someone had looked at Marina from across the office, they would have seen exactly what they expected to see. A woman in her early 30s, professional, friendly, competent, the kind of person everyone liked, the kind of person people described with words like reliable, thoughtful, and kind, the kind of person who remembered birthdays without needing reminders, who noticed when someone got a haircut, who stayed late to help coworkers finish projects that weren't even hers, who always seemed available whenever somebody needed something. To most people, Marina looked perfectly fine, but Raphael had begun noticing things that didn't fit that picture. Tiny things, the kind of details that disappear inside ordinary days. At first, he dismissed them. Everybody has bad weeks. Everybody gets tired. Everybody carries things they don't talk about. But something kept bothering him. Every morning, he arrived at the office around the same time. Not because he was especially punctual, it was simply part of his routine. He liked quiet mornings. He liked those few moments before phones started ringing and conversations filled the building. Most days, Marina was already there. She sat near a large window overlooking the city, usually with a cup of coffee beside her, sometimes reading emails, sometimes staring at her computer screen, sometimes simply looking outside. The first time Raphael noticed her staring out the window, it seemed normal. The second time, he thought nothing of it. By the 10th time, however, he started paying attention. There was something unusual about the way she looked at the city. It wasn't the look of someone enjoying the view. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even distraction. It felt more like distance, as though her body was sitting in that chair while her mind was somewhere else entirely. Far away. Far beyond the streets, the buildings, and the traffic below. One morning he entered the office and saw her sitting exactly like that. The sunlight was spilling through the glass. Most people would have called it a beautiful morning, but Marina didn't seem to notice. Her coffee sat untouched. Her computer screen was dark. She was simply staring, motionless, lost in thought. Then another coworker walked into the room. Immediately she smiled. The transformation happened so quickly that Raphael almost questioned whether he had imagined everything. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. The coworker smiled back. A brief conversation followed, a joke, a laugh. Then both of them started working. Everything looked normal again. But Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something important, something hidden. That evening, he found himself thinking about it during the drive home. Not because he was interested in Marina romantically, at least not then. The truth was simpler. He recognized something painfully familiar. Years ago, there had been a period of his life that almost nobody knew about. Not because he had hidden it particularly well. People simply weren't looking. Back then, he had been the same version of himself everyone expected. He showed up to work, paid his bills, answered messages, went to family gatherings, made occasional jokes, functioned. From the outside, everything seemed fine. Inside, however, he felt exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. There were nights when he sat alone in his apartment staring at the ceiling for hours. Not because anything specific had happened, not because there was a crisis, but because life had slowly become heavy. Heavy in a way that was difficult to explain. The strange thing about emotional exhaustion, Raphael had learned, was that it rarely looked dramatic. Most people imagine suffering as something obvious, tears, anger, breakdowns. But often it looked exactly like a normal day. A person answering emails, a person attending meetings, a person smiling politely, a person saying, "I'm fine." That was why he couldn't ignore the feeling he got whenever he looked at Marina, because he had worn that same smile once. The smile that convinced everyone. The smile that prevented questions. The smile that allowed a person to disappear quietly while remaining visible to the world. Over the next few weeks, Raphael began noticing more. Not intentionally, the details simply kept appearing. One afternoon he saw Marina spend nearly an hour helping a new employee solve a problem. She was patient, encouraging, calm. The younger employee left, looking relieved. Marina smiled and wished him luck. The moment he disappeared around the corner, her expression changed. Not dramatically, not enough for most people to notice. But Raphael noticed. Her shoulders lowered slightly, her eyes closed. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Then she sat completely still for several seconds, as if gathering enough energy to continue the day. A minute later, someone else approached her desk. Instantly, the smile returned. It was almost impressive, like watching someone switch masks. Weeks turned into months, and little moments like that kept happening. At lunch, Marina often sat with groups of coworkers. She listened more than she spoke. People shared stories, complaints, problems, frustrations. Somehow conversations always drifted toward her, toward advice, toward comfort, toward support. People seemed drawn to her, and Raphael understood why. She made people feel heard, made people feel important, made people feel safe. Yet something strange stood out. Nobody ever seemed to ask about her. Not really. Of course they asked the usual questions. How was your weekend? Everything okay? Busy day? But those questions lived on the surface. Nobody slowed down long enough to hear anything deeper, and perhaps nobody expected there to be anything deeper. One Thursday afternoon, the entire office gathered for a small birthday celebration. Cake, coffee, music playing softly from someone's speaker. The atmosphere was relaxed. Everyone laughed. Marina was at the center of the group, as usual, smiling, talking, making sure everyone else was included. Then someone suggested taking a photo. People gathered together. The picture was taken. A few seconds later, everyone crowded around to see it. The reactions were immediate. We look great. Send it to me. Post it. More laughter, more conversation. Meanwhile, Raphael found himself looking at Marina. Not the photo. Her. She was smiling in the picture. But the smile looked strangely different from the one she wore years earlier in older photos hanging on social media. The difference was subtle, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. The older smile seemed effortless, alive. This one looked tired, not fake, just tired, as if joy had become something she performed instead of something she felt. That realization stayed with him for days. Then something happened that made it impossible to pretend he wasn't seeing it anymore. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind of gray afternoon that made the entire city feel quieter. Many employees had already left. The office was unusually calm. Raphael was gathering his things when he remembered a document he needed from the printer room. As he walked down the hallway, he heard a sound. Not crying, not exactly. More like someone taking a shaky breath. He stopped. The sound came from the break room. For a moment he hesitated. Then he glanced through the partially open doorway. Marina was standing alone near the counter. She wasn't crying, but she looked close. Her hands were pressed against the edge of the counter, her head slightly lowered, her eyes closed. The expression on her face wasn't sadness. It was exhaustion. Pure exhaustion. The kind that reaches deeper than physical tiredness, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. Raphael immediately looked away. The moment felt private, sacred almost. He wasn't supposed to see it. A few seconds later, he heard footsteps. Another employee entered the room. And just like that, Marina smiled. Instantly. Effortlessly. As though nothing had happened. As though the woman standing there now was completely different from the woman who had existed only seconds earlier. The coworker never noticed. Why would they? The performance was flawless. But Raphael had seen behind the curtain. And once you see something like that, it becomes impossible to unsee it. That night, he barely paid attention to the television playing in his apartment. His thoughts kept returning to the same image. Marina standing alone, trying to catch her breath, trying to hold herself together, trying to find enough strength for one more conversation, one more smile, one more day. For the first time, a question entered his mind, a question he couldn't get rid of. When was the last time someone had asked her how she was doing, and actually waited for the real answer? He didn't know it yet, but that question was about to change both of their lives. And the first step toward that change would come from the most ordinary place imaginable. An elevator, on an ordinary morning. A moment so small that everyone else would forget it. Yet it would become the moment neither of them would ever forget. The elevator doors opened just as Raphael reached the hallway. Marina was already inside. She looked up from her phone and gave him a small smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning." He stepped in. The doors closed. For a few seconds, everything was ordinary. The soft hum of the elevator, the faint reflection of the two of them in the metal doors, the numbers changing above their heads. Then the elevator stopped. Not violently, not dramatically. It simply froze between floors. The lights flickered once. Marina looked up. Raphael pressed the button. Nothing. Then he pressed the emergency call. A voice answered, calm and bored, telling them maintenance had been notified and it would only take a few minutes. Only a few minutes. But sometimes a few minutes are enough to open something that has been closed for years. Marina leaned against the wall and laughed softly. "Well," she said, "that's one way to start the day." Her smile appeared automatically. Raphael saw it happen, that familiar movement, that practiced brightness, that gentle disguise. And for some reason, maybe because there was nowhere to walk away to, maybe because the office noise could not interrupt them, he finally asked, "Are you okay?" She answered almost before he finished. "Of course." Too fast, too clean, too familiar. Raphael nodded once, then looked at the floor. He could have stopped there. Most people would have. That was the social agreement. Someone says they are fine. You accept it. You move on. You protect yourself from the discomfort of a deeper answer. But he remembered her in the break room, hands against the counter, eyes closed, breathing like someone holding back an entire storm. So he looked at her again. "No," he said quietly. "I mean, are you okay for real?" Marina did not move. For a moment, he thought he had gone too far. Her expression changed so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. The smile faded first. Then her eyes lost the effort of pretending. And what remained on her face was not anger, not irritation, not embarrassment. It was fear. The fear of being seen. The fear of being asked something she did not know how to answer. "I'm just tired," she said. But this time her voice was different. Lower, less certain. Raphael nodded. "I know." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know what that kind of tired looks like." Silence filled the elevator again. Outside, somewhere beyond the closed doors, the building continued living as if nothing important was happening. People walking, phones ringing, meetings beginning, coffee being poured. But inside that small suspended space, Marina looked at Raphael as if he had touched a place no one had reached in a long time. She opened her mouth to speak, closed it, then looked away. "I don't think I know how to answer that question anymore," she whispered. Raphael felt his chest tighten. He did not rush to comfort her. He did not offer advice. He did not say something easy like everything would be fine. He only stood there with her, present, quiet, unmoving, and somehow that made it worse. Or maybe better, because Marina brought one hand to her face and pressed her fingers against her eyes, not crying, not fully, just trying not to. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For making this weird." "You didn't." "I did." "You didn't." The simplicity of his voice seemed to disarm her. She let out a breath that almost sounded like a broken laugh. Then the elevator jerked softly and began moving again. The moment disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. The doors opened. The hallway stood before them, bright and normal. Marina stepped out first, then stopped. She turned back. Her eyes were still damp, but her face was composed again. "Thank you," she said. Raphael did not ask what for. He already knew. She walked away, and he remained there for a second longer, understanding that something had shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, but undeniably. After that morning, Marina did not suddenly change. Life does not work that way. People do not open the deepest parts of themselves because of one question. Pain does not disappear because someone notices it, but something small had been planted. A quiet permission. The permission to be less perfect around him. The permission to not smile immediately. The permission to let a silence remain. At first, it showed in tiny ways. She stopped pretending quite as quickly when he asked about her day. Instead of saying, "I'm fine," she sometimes said, "It's been long." Instead of smiling through exhaustion, she allowed herself to sigh. Instead of filling every silence with politeness, she sometimes simply stood beside him without speaking, and Raphael understood the importance of that. He knew trust was not built from dramatic speeches. It was built from repeated proof, from someone staying calm when you reveal a small truth, from someone not using your vulnerability against you, from someone not turning your sadness into a problem they need to solve immediately. One evening, after most people had left, Raphael found Marina still at her desk. The office was nearly dark except for the blue light of her monitor. She was staring at a spreadsheet, but her eyes were unfocused. "You're still here," he said. She looked up. "So are you. I forgot my charger. I'm pretending this report will finish itself." He smiled. "Is it working?" "Not even a little." There was a pause. Then she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her forehead. "I hate that I can't turn it off." "What?" "My head." Raphael waited. Marina looked at the screen again. "It's like there's always something. Work, my parents, bills, people needing me, things I should have done, things I might mess up, conversations I replay, messages I haven't answered." She laughed once without humor. "And then I feel guilty for being tired, because technically nothing terrible is happening." Raphael pulled a chair closer and sat a safe distance away. "That doesn't make it less heavy." She looked at him. Most people would have corrected her perspective, told her to be grateful, told her others had it worse, told her to relax. But Raphael did not compete with her pain. He simply acknowledged it. And that was new. Pain becomes lonelier when it has to defend itself. Marina seemed to soften under the absence of judgment. "My mother called today," she said after a while. "She asked if I could help her with something this weekend. Then my sister texted because she's overwhelmed. Then someone from work asked if I could review a file tonight." "Did you say yes?" She smiled faintly. "You already know." Raphael did know. That was the problem. Marina had turned saying yes into a survival language, a way to remain needed, a way to remain safe, a way to make sure no one had a reason to leave. "You're allowed to be unavailable," he said. She shook her head. "I know that in theory. And in practice?" "In practice, I feel like I'm abandoning people." Raphael looked at her carefully. "Who taught you that needing rest is abandonment?" The question landed hard. Her eyes lowered. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her voice came quietly. "I don't know." But the way she said it made him suspect she did. A few days later, they had coffee after work. Not because either of them called it a date. They didn't. It was safer that way. It was just coffee. Just two co-workers avoiding traffic. Just a conversation that lasted longer than expected. The cafe was small, tucked between a pharmacy and an old bookstore. The kind of place most people passed without noticing. Inside, the lights were warm, the chairs mismatched, the tables worn at the edges. Rain tapped against the front window, turning the city outside into blurred movement and reflected light. Marina wrapped both hands around her cup. She always did that, as if warmth helped her speak. "You ask strange questions," she said. Raphael looked up. "Do I?" "Yes." "Bad strange?" She thought about it. "No, dangerous strange." He smiled softly. "That sounds worse." "It's not." She stared at the steam rising from her coffee. "You ask things people usually avoid. Maybe people avoid the wrong things." She looked at him then. Not quickly, not casually. It was the kind of look that measured whether a person was safe. "I almost didn't come today," she admitted. "Why?" "Because I knew I might talk." "And that scared you?" "Yes." Why? She took a long breath. Because talking changes things. Raphael understood. Silence has its own structure, its own fragile order. Once the truth is spoken, you cannot return to not knowing. Marina's fingers tightened around the cup. I don't like being seen when I'm not okay, she said. Most people don't. No, I mean, she searched for the words. I don't know who I am if I'm not useful. Raphael remained still. Her eyes became wet, but she did not look away. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds honest, she swallowed. I've spent so many years being the one who handles things. The calm one, the understanding one, the one who says, don't worry, I'll figure it out. And people loved that version of me. Her voice softened. But I don't know if they loved me. The sentence stayed between them. Heavy, bare, real. Raphael felt the urge to say something comforting, but he resisted the easy answer. Instead, he asked gently, what would happen if you stopped figuring everything out? Marina looked down. I think I'd find out who only stayed because I made their life easier. That was the first time Raphael understood the shape of her fear. It was not simply exhaustion. It was not simply responsibility. It was the terror of being loved conditionally, of being valued only for what she could provide, of disappearing the moment she needed something back. The rain continued against the window. The cafe grew quieter. A couple near the door left. The barista wiped the counter. The world kept moving gently around them. And Marina, for the first time, did not put her smile back on. She let Raphael see the sadness. Not all of it, but enough. And he honored it by not looking away. Over the next weeks, their connection became part of both their routines. Nothing obvious, nothing that others would immediately name. A message after a difficult meeting. A shared look across the room when someone said something absurd. A quiet walk to the parking lot. A coffee left on a desk without explanation. Marina began trusting him with small truths. I slept badly. I don't want to go home yet. I'm angry and I don't know what to do with it. I said yes again when I wanted to say no. Each admission sounded simple, but Raphael knew each one cost her something, so he treated them carefully, not as problems, not as invitations to rescue her, as gifts. Because when someone has spent years hiding, every honest sentence is an act of courage. One evening, as they stood outside the building beneath the awning, waiting for the rain to slow, Marina said, I used to think being chosen would feel loud. Raphael glanced at her. What do you mean? She watched cars pass through the wet street. I thought it would be obvious. Someone doing something grand, saying all the right words, making some big promise. She paused. But lately, I wonder if being chosen is quieter than that. Raphael's voice came low. How quiet? She turned toward him. Like someone noticing when you stop smiling. He did not answer. He could not, because something inside him had shifted again. A truth had been growing beneath the surface, and both of them could feel it now. Neither said it. Not yet. Some feelings need time before they can survive being named. But after that night, every moment carried a second meaning. When she laughed, he felt relief. When she went quiet, he felt concern. When she looked at him from across the room, something in his chest answered before his mind could explain it, and Marina changed too. She did not become suddenly healed. That would have been a lie. There were still days when her smile appeared too quickly. Still days when she answered messages she should have ignored. Still days when she apologized for needing space. But now, sometimes, she caught herself. Sometimes she would stop mid-sentence and say, Actually, no, I can't do that today. The first time Raphael heard her say it to someone at work, he looked over in surprise. Marina's hands were tense. Her voice was polite but firm. The co-worker accepted it and walked away. Nothing collapsed. No one hated her. No disaster followed. Marina looked at Raphael from across the room. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were bright with something fragile and new. Pride, maybe even freedom. Later, in the hallway, she whispered, I almost took it back. But you didn't. No. How does it feel? She thought for a moment. Terrifying. Then she smiled. A real smile. And good. That smile stayed with Raphael the rest of the day. Because it was different. Not the polite office smile. Not the performance. Not the mask. This one reached her eyes. Softly. Carefully. As if something inside her was learning it was safe to return. And that was when Raphael admitted the truth to himself. He was falling in love with her. Not because she needed help. Not because he wanted to save her. Not because of the sadness he had seen. He was falling in love with the whole of her, the tenderness she gave so naturally, the intelligence in the way she listened, the quiet humor she revealed when she felt comfortable, the strength she carried even when it hurt, the softness she tried to hide, the way she remembered small things about people, the way she looked at the rain as though it understood her, the way she was slowly learning to let herself be cared for. And perhaps most of all, he loved the person she became when she stopped performing, the real Marina. Tired sometimes, complicated sometimes, afraid sometimes, but warm, present, deeply alive. One Friday night, long after everyone had left, Marina found Raphael standing near the office window. He was the one staring out this time. She approached quietly. Now you're the one looking far away. He smiled. Maybe I learned from you. She stood beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The city lights flickered below. The office behind them was dark and empty. Then Marina said, "You never talk much about yourself." Raphael glanced at her. "That's not true." "It is. I talk. You answer." He looked at her then, and she smiled gently. "That's different." He wanted to deflect, to make a joke, to move the attention away from himself. But then he remembered all the times she had allowed herself to be honest with him. Trust asks to be returned eventually. So he looked back toward the city and said, "There was a time when I disappeared too." Marina did not interrupt. "A few years ago," he continued, "I was going through a hard period. Nothing dramatic from the outside. I still worked, still showed up, still answered people. But I felt gone." The word surprised him, because it was the right one. Gone. Not sad exactly. Not broken in an obvious way. Just absent from his own life. Marina's voice was careful. "Did anyone notice?" He smiled faintly. "No." Her eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but not with indifference. With memory. "I think that's why I noticed you." Marina looked at him. Raphael kept his eyes on the window. "I know what it looks like when someone is trying to survive without making noise." The silence that followed was different from all the others. More intimate, more fragile. Marina's hand rested on the windowsill, close to his. Not touching. Almost. That almost felt louder than contact. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe that's why I trusted you." He turned slightly. Their eyes met. And for a moment, neither of them hid anything. Not completely. Not anymore.